Overcome your laziness. The smart way. Once upon a time, in a quiet, humble village, nestled near the edge of a great kingdom, there lived a young boy named Ryan. He lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town with his hard-working parents. Ryan was known throughout the village, but not for his strength or his diligence. Instead, Ryan was famous for being incredibly lazy. While other boys ran errands or practiced sports, Ryan preferred to lie in the shade of a large oak tree, watching the clouds drift by. Every day, his father took him to the rice fields to help with the farming. Ryan's specific job was simple. He had to chase away the flocks of birds that swooped down to steal the precious rice grains. Most of the farmers and their children ran around the fields shouting, waving sticks, or using slingshots to keep the pests away. It was tiring work that required constant movement under the hot sun. Ryan, however, despised the idea of running around in the heat. He didn't want to move a muscle if he didn't have to. So he put his clever mind to work to serve his laziness. He spent a few days building a network of wooden poles stationed in different corners of the field. He connected all of them with a complex system of long ropes. By lying down in his favorite spot under a tree, he could simply tug on a single rope, and the poles across the field would shake, scaring the birds away without him ever having to stand up. His father watched this invention with a mix of pride and worry. He often thought to himself, "The boy is smart, there is no doubt about that, but he is so lazy. If I ever get sick or too old to work, how will Ryan find the energy to take care of everything?" However, since the birds were scared away and the work was technically done, his father never scolded him. One scorching summer, a severe drought hit the region. The sun beat down relentlessly and the air turned dry and dusty. During this difficult time, Ryan's father fell terribly ill. He was bedridden, too weak to even lift his head, let alone work in the fields. Suddenly, the responsibility of the entire farm fell onto Ryan's shoulders. Ryan tried to step up. He went to the fields every day, but he wasn't used to the grueling physical labor of carrying water buckets and tending to the soil. His body ached, and his mind complained. He did the bare minimum, hoping it would be enough. But farming requires more than just clever tricks. It requires sweat and persistence. After a few weeks, the rice crops began to wither and turn brown. They died because they didn't get enough water, and Ryan simply couldn't summon the energy to save them alone. That night, the reality of his failure hit him. Ryan sat outside on the porch steps under a vast starry sky. He looked at the dead fields and felt a heavy lump in his throat. He felt useless and deeply disappointed in himself. "Why didn't I ever practice working hard?" he whispered to the silence. "My cleverness didn't save the crops. Now my family has no harvest, and our hope is gone." The next morning, a commotion stirred the village. Ryan heard loud voices and the sound of a trumpet. Curious, he walked to the town square to see what was happening. A royal soldier dressed in shiny armor was reading a scroll to the crowd. He announced a grand competition to be held at the king's palace. The challenge was open to anyone, and the prize was life-changing, a massive chest filled with gold. Ryan's eyes widened. He thought, "A chest of gold? That is enough to buy food for years. It could pay for father's medicine. This could save my family." Without hesitation, Ryan stepped forward and announced that he would join the competition. The villagers burst into laughter. They pointed at him and whispered, "Ryan, the lazy boy, how can he win? He can barely lift a bucket of water. He will be crushed by the strong warriors from the capital." But for the first time in his life, Ryan didn't care about the easy way out. He didn't care about their mockery. He had 3 days to travel to the palace, So he packed a small bag and left immediately. His parents were worried he would fail, but they hoped that perhaps this journey would finally teach him the value of effort. 3 days later, the competition began. Hundreds of participants gathered at the edge of a massive, wide lake. Ryan looked around and felt a knot of fear in his stomach. The other competitors were tall, muscular men, soldiers, blacksmiths, and athletes. They looked powerful and ready. How can I possibly beat these people? Ryan thought, feeling small. The royal judge announced the rules. The first challenge is simple. You must cross this lake. The first 3 people to reach the other side will qualify for the final round. The crowd roared. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1, go! Splash! Almost everyone jumped into the water immediately, using their strong arms to swim furiously against the current. But Ryan stood still on the shore. He knew his limits. If I swim, I will get tired halfway and drown, he reasoned. There is no way I can outswim them. Ryan scanned his surroundings. His eyes landed on the nearby forest floor. He saw fallen branches, vines, and driftwood. An idea sparked in his mind. This is a race to cross the lake, he mumbled. The rules never said we had to swim. While the strong men were exhausting themselves in the water, Ryan ran into the woods. He quickly gathered sturdy branches and tied them together with vines to create a small, crude raft. He found a flat piece of wood to use as a paddle. By the time he pushed his raft into the water, the swimmers were already far ahead. But soon, fatigue set in for them. They slowed down, gasping for air. Ryan, however, sat on his raft and paddled steadily. He wasn't using all his energy to stay afloat. He was using his energy to move forward. Slowly but surely, he glided past the exhausted swimmers one by one. In the end, Ryan reached the opposite shore. He finished in 3rd place, just enough to qualify for the next round. 2 other participants, giants of men with incredible strength, also made it. The next day, the final competition began. The atmosphere was tense. The 3 finalists stood at the starting line. In front of each of them was a gigantic, solid wooden block. It was heavy, rough, and square. The judge pointed to a finish line 1 kilometer away. The task is to move this block to the finish line, he declared. Behind you there is a table of tools. You may choose only one tool to help you. The first contestant, relying on brute strength, grabbed a thick rope. He tied it around the block and began to pull, his veins popping with effort. The block moved, but slowly. The second contestant chose a long metal bar to use as a lever. He pried the block forward inch by inch, sweating profusely under the sun. Ryan stood before his block. He didn't rush to the tool table. He closed his eyes and thought, I am not as strong as them. If I try to push or pull this square block, I will collapse before I reach the halfway point. I need to think smarter. He walked to the table and picked up a small, sharp carving knife. The spectators gasped. A knife? Someone shouted. Has he given up? How can a knife move a block? Ryan ignored them. He knelt beside his wooden block. Instead of trying to push it, he began to cut. He carved the sharp corners of the square block. He chipped away the edges. Wood shavings flew into the air. He worked with a speed and focus he had never shown in the rice fields. Sweat poured down his face, but he didn't stop. The crowd watched in confusion, then in realization. Ryan was carving the square block into a sphere, a ball. An hour passed. The other 2 men were exhausted, having only moved their heavy square blocks a few hundred meters. Ryan stood up, wiping his brow. His block was now a rough, round ball. He gave it a gentle push. The wooden ball rolled forward effortlessly. Ryan jogged behind it, giving it occasional pushes to keep the momentum going. He breezed past the struggling strongman, who watched in disbelief as the lazy boy rolled his way to victory. Ryan crossed the finish line first, with energy to spare. The silence of the crowd turned into a roar of applause. They cheered for the boy who had used his brain to overcome his lack of brawn. Ryan returned to his village as a hero, pulling a cart carrying the chest of gold. He saved his family and paid for his father's recovery. But more importantly, Ryan had changed. This story teaches us a powerful lesson. Lazy people are often the most creative because they look for the easiest way to do things. But creativity alone is not enough. To achieve something great, you need a powerful why. Ryan's love for his family became his fuel. So if you ever feel lazy or unmotivated, don't just look for a shortcut. Find a reason, a dream, a person, or a goal that matters enough to make you move. When you combine smart thinking with a strong purpose, you can overcome any obstacle.